And good morning, folks. How we doing? Spectre and House here on a Thursday. It is the 23rd day of October. Hopefully you guys doing well. Week and that winding down, the month winding down, the year winding down. Not too much left in the year. What do we got? About 9 weeks or so left of 2025, and we are out of here. It's been quite the year for sure, and time has certainly flown. How's everybody doing here this morning? Hopefully you got your coffee in hand, your beverage of choice, all that good stuff here this morning. Got a little bit to get to here on the broadcast here this morning. And of course, it is a Health and Wellness Thursday, so on the back end of the show, we'll be getting into some health and wellness related news and that, what's going on around the country, aside from everything else and that going on. Let's see. This morning, let's get into it here this morning. Do appreciate you tuning in wherever you're tuning in from. If you're hanging out over on the Beam side here this morning, do appreciate you guys being here. If you're hanging out over on the Foxhole side here this morning, good to have you guys aboard. If you're hanging out over on the Kick Rumble side over on D Live, good to have you guys aboard. And of course, YouTube and that up here live here this morning, at least for the short period. And for those not on the YouTube side, kind of been dipping our feet back in the water in the last week or so, just to kind of test things out and see how things fare. Just kind of doing the front end of the show here, and hopefully some of you guys are making your way over to the various other platforms to continue on with the show. Do appreciate it if you do. Of course, the notifications net having gone out to the Twitter side and over on to True Social, Gab, and the like. Find those and share those out if you'd be so kind. That being said, some of the stuff we're going to get to on the broadcast here this morning. I'll talk a little bit about the food recall. The FDA confirms a high risk level for recall of 6.7 million eggs. Yeah, seems like reminiscent of the days during the Biden regime, during the avian flu epidemic, and that, if you want to call it that, back then. We'll get into the details here in just a bit. Also, China's battery giants fled overseas markets as exports surged 220%. Talk about the details of that here. Also, global corporate tax levels continue to slide, but France remains the highest. We'll get into the breakdown of the various countries and how they stack up. Also, an interesting graphic. These are the U.S. cities where young Americans can still afford a house, and not too many places. And that obviously, as obviously with the onslaught of the scamdemic and that, interest rates net having risen the way they have, nobody's really moving too much around the country. From there, VW halts the golf production in Wolfsburg as chip shortage worsens. We'll get into that and knock-on effects of what's happened with the chip plants and that in the Netherlands. I think, yeah, the Netherlands. Yeah, I think that's where they're at. Yeah. I'll get into that here in just a bit as well. Also, Apple slashes iPhone air output, boosts production of the base Pro iPhone 17 models, Nikki reports. Get into details of what's going on with the old iPhone as they just released the iPhone 17. Also, as auto loan delinquencies soar, repossessions on track to break record. No surprise, right, for how much we tracked student loans, various loans in general, auto loans, all on the rise. Trillions of dollars in added a mix. We'll get into that. I'll also talk about Bolivia's new president backs blockchain to tackle government corruption. Interesting way to go about it, I suppose, and see how that fares. I'll also get into another cockroach, subprime auto lender, Primaland, enters bankruptcy. So add it to the mix. What are we up to? About 4 or 5 now. We got a couple banks, also ensnaring Jeffries a little bit, and the various folks in that with auto parts and you name it. Yeah, this is not done yet, folks, and this is in the underbelly of finance. AI deepfakes fueling digitally enabled crime wave and the freight industry. We'll get into the details of that here in just a bit as well. And as mentioned, we got some health and wellness stuff and that to get to here on the broadcast here this morning. So hopefully you got your coffee topped off, got your donut in hand, all that good stuff here this morning. We got plenty to get to. That being said, let's take a look, see what's doing across the country by way of weather here this morning. And out to the left coast net we go here this morning. Not much doing up and down the left coast. Maybe got a little bit of a system net coming down out of Canada along the coastal areas net, starting to creep into the Pacific Northwest, up in the northwest portions of Washington State there. Otherwise, we got kind of a juiced up system net coming across Nevada into Colorado, over into Arizona, New Mexico area. Got all sorts of lightning strikes in the mix there. We'll see what sort of precip we're getting out of that here momentarily. Everybody else net across the west side of the Mississippi, a net looking pretty good, top to bottom, and up toward the northern parts of the states, looking pretty good. Folks net over into the Ohio area, over to Pennsylvania, up along the lakes, maybe seeing a little bit of a rain and precip in that here this morning, as are the folks that up into New York. Folks that otherwise up and down the eastern seaboard looking pretty free and clear of precip here this morning, at least again according to radar. Florida the same. And at least by way of any sort of spinners on the water, it looks like, here we go. We got 92E, I think it is. Yeah, 92E, hanging out down here off the left coast of Mexico here. Unnamed storm starting to get itself together. We'll see whether or not that turns into a named storm, and that here in the next day or so. Looks like that is it on the Pacific side. Over to the Atlantic side, don't think we have anything going on there either. However, we do have Melissa hanging out down here, down in the Caribbean, and Melissa and that kind of formed off of Venezuela, Colombia area, and that here in recent days, and there you see where it is projected to go. Apparently, it's going to do a little zigging and zagging here, and come on up maybe through the islands and see whether or not it has enough steam to blow past that, and potentially where that goes. Looks like, at least for the moment, it looks like it's just going to probably hit the islands and so forth, but not come anywhere close to mainland U.S. or Florida or anything of that like, but we'll keep on it here, see what happens with it. And from there, it looks like by way of precip here this morning. Folks, net again out to the Pacific Northwest. Not much doing up and down the coastal areas there. Maybe just a little bit seeping in over on the Pacific Northwest there, up in the northwestern portions there. And folks, net coming down into Oregon and down northern parts of California. See a little fog in that on the drive here this morning. Otherwise, looks like the folks net coming across Nevada into Utah and maybe into Colorado. It looks like a little bit of rain and that through there. It doesn't look like, what is that there? A little fog net in the mix, I guess. I was kind of wondering if that was going to be the frozen precip variety. It doesn't appear to be so. And the folks net down in Arizona, New Mexico area, picking up a little bit of rain and that here this morning too. And it looks like just some trace rain. Doesn't look to be too much, and by way of any sort of stuff along the southeast, looks like we got a little fog, and that coming across Louisiana into Mississippi, Alabama, all through that corridor. A little fog in that to the north as well, if you're up in the eastern side of North Dakota in that here this morning. Perhaps into the west side of Minnesota, seeing a little bit of fog up around the Canadian border up there. Otherwise, looks like the folks net in maybe the northern parts of Michigan, maybe seeing a little bit of rain in that here this morning, along the coastal areas net of Lake Michigan and that to the west side of the state there. And the folks net over into Ohio, Pennsylvania, up through New York, along the border, along those areas, maybe picking up a little bit of trace rain and that here this morning as well. Otherwise, everybody else net looking pretty good net on the day. Folks net up in New England looking pretty good, as are the folks net down to the southeast, all the way down into Florida and that here this morning. And temperature-wise, looks like folks net down in Florida coming in right around the, looks like to be about the upper 70s net here by the time you hit the southern parts of Florida here this morning. Northern parts of the state, not so much, in the mid to upper 40s net. If you're in the northern parts of Florida here this morning. Georgia in the 40s, looks like 40s net pretty much the name of the game. Pretty much on up the eastern seaboard, 30s net. You start to tail off into by the time you hit the Virginia, North Carolina line. To the north, that 30s, 40s, 50s net if you're over toward New Jersey and net here this morning, mid-50s actually. And it looks like folks net to the north of that, and the 40s net pretty much up into Maine. It looks like 40s pretty consistent across the board there. Clear over to New York, northern part of the state there. 40s net pretty much across much of the state there, as well as Pennsylvania in the 40s, mid-40s. Looks like West Virginia in the 40s. Pretty much a broken record up and down the eastern seaboard, and by the time you get down toward the southern portion of the country, down along the Gulf of America, it looks like some 60s net coming across Florida, Alabama, coming over into Mississippi in the 50s net, 40s net by the time you get down over to Louisiana and net here this morning as well. Otherwise, sweeping across the coastal areas net down into Texas, around the Houston area, right around the 70-degree mark or so. Folks net down in the southern part of Texas, coming in the mid-70s net here this morning. But to the north, it looks like in the 40s, so you got not quite a 30-degree swing, but pretty close, top to bottom of the state there. Pushing up the plains net, Oklahoma, Kansas in the 40s. To the north of that, in the 30s we go. And even some 20s in the mix if you're up in North Dakota here this morning. Folks net over into Minnesota in the 20s and 30s both net here this morning. Starting to get a little chipper for this time of year. 30s net if you're over into Wisconsin net here this morning. Some 40s net down toward the south. Back toward Montana, it looks like, in the 30s net more to the east side of the state, and maybe some 40s net back toward west. Idaho, in the 30s, 40s both net in the mix across much of the state there, and the folks net over into Washington State got some 30s net across the east side of the state, Some 40s toward the 50s net along the coastal areas net of Washington here this morning. About the same for the folks net down in Oregon, some 40s and 50s along the coast, some 30s net more inland. Top end of California in the 30s net here this morning as well. 40s net along the coast, and by the time you get down toward the southern portion of California here this morning, you're in the 60s net here to start your day. 60s net if you're down in the southwest portions of Arizona here this morning as well. And it looks like by way of cloud cover, folks net up to the northwest. It looks like starting to see some of that creep net come in out of Canada and along the coastal area. Starting to see those clouds come across there. So we'll be seeing some cloudiness and net across much of Washington and Oregon here today. Some sun out in front of it, but otherwise looks like we got kind of a patch of clouds net down through the middle and western portions of the country there, and maybe a little bit of sun in that if you're down in the southwest portions of Arizona, southern portions of California here this morning. Otherwise, Texas, New Mexico, back through Colorado, Utah, up through that corridor, all under some clouds net here this morning. Out front of it, though, folks net across the plains and the upper Midwest net, looking pretty sunny net here to start your day. Cloud cover net down to the south, Louisiana, clear over to Georgia, net through that area, and across the top end of the country from Minnesota clear over to probably, I'd say probably over the Maine area with that system net up in Canada. Should be seeing some cloud cover net here on the day, maybe in and out of some clouds net there. But otherwise, everybody else net up and down the eastern seaboard from probably Maryland all the way down into Georgia should see some fairly sunny skies net here on your Thursday. And that's a quick take look at the weather, and by way of any sort of power outages net here this morning, do a quick refresh here. Looks like we're holding right around about 28,000 folks without power across all the country here. About 3,800, 3,900 or so over to California, about another 2,700 or so over to North Carolina. Not enough to trip the old stoplight charts net here this morning, so no major weather issues net causing any problems in that regard here this morning. And let's see, over to the smoke and fire maps net we go. Hopefully winding down for the season here, hopefully. Still got some fires net from Alberta and westward, net up in Canada. It looks like still got Wednesday, Tuesday, a couple dozen fires here, there, up around the Canadian border along with the U.S., and a couple out in front of that, a couple dozen or so to the east of Edmonton and through that corridor, it looks like. And some of those fires net, at least looking to the Pacific Northwest, looks like a lot of that smoke is shooting back into Canada rather than coming down for a change. And it looks like some of those fires up in Washington State, dozens and dozens of fires. See it kind of speckled on the map there, some dense smoke in that in the mix there. So may see some poor air quality in that if you're up in Washington, up through Idaho, maybe into the western ports of Montana. Folks net up into Oregon, got a couple dozen fires net around the Portland area down to the south, and across top end of California, down around the Portland line, got a dozen or so fires, another dozen or so to the west, or east rather, and it looks like north of Sacramento got a couple dozen fires, some of those starting to kick up a little bit of smoke, and may see some poor air quality in those respective areas. And to the east of San Fran and down south of Fresno, still got a couple, 2, 3, 5, 6 fires net down in those parts. Another couple, 2, 3 net south of San Diego, down around Tijuana, it looks like, down in those areas. And coming across the southeast, still got plenty of fires net down in those respective areas. Florida, Georgia, coming across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, back up through Missouri, into the western parts of Tennessee. Dozens and dozens and dozens of fires net to contend with. 122 fires net down in Georgia at the moment here, and looks like some of those net starting to kick up some dense smoke, so you may see some smoke and haze and poor air quality both in those respective areas net here this morning here as well. So perhaps could benefit from a little bit of rain in order to help tamp some of those down. And that being said, over to the markets we go here to start your morning. Futures flat as oil surges, and that's where we're going to cut it off with the folks over on YouTube here this morning. Do appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you find your way over to the other platforms net here this morning. Again, you can jump on over to Beam, you can jump on over to Kick, D-Live, over to Rumble, over to Foxhole, wherever you so choose, and we'll see you guys